but sometimes it has been because I am such an animal crazy lady. I have recalled times of being an animal. So humans may recall human lives way more than they recall animal lives because you're living a human life and you need those human lessons to be recalled.
Hello, Tricia. A warm welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful, Yannicka. So nice to connect with you and thanks for having me. Love it.
Yeah, it's so nice to connect again. We have done some interviews before. You've been a masterclass teacher in my membership, and now we're going to have a collaboration about animal communication, which I'm really excited about because many people have asked me, can you do more on animals and how we can, telepathically communicate with animals, or how can I learn to do that? And I don't have animals myself, but I'm very curious about animals, what it is and how we can communicate with them. And it was funny because I just saw a butterfly today was really struggling, and it's just typical that that happens today, and I saw it on the street and I'm like trying to help it survive, but I'm like, how can I make it survive? And I feel like we had this moment where I like sort of had it in my hand and just put it over to the grass because I didn't know what to do with it. And I just felt that it was a moment, and that happened today when I was going to speak with you. And you've also had a class in our membership about reading signs from animals that we see around us, that they speak to us all the time. So this conversation can go into many directions, which I'm excited about. But I want to say that all of you who are watching, you're so welcome to join us in our live webinar that we're having in April 2023. So you can just check out the link below and you can join us. And there you basically will answer questions about how to communicate with animals and how to deepen this skill that you have that we all can learn.
Yes.
So before we go into the communication with animals, I would love to be a bit philosophical and ask about what animals really are, because I do a lot of interviews about what happens after we die, and what a soul is, and then I'm curious about animals. So do they have their own soul? And when we speak about reincarnation, can I reincarnate as an animal? And now a bunch of questions comes, but what about the afterlife? Do like the cats that I'm close to go to the same afterlife? So let's just start with, can we reincarnate as an animal? Like, are they the same as us, basically?
Oh, I love this. This is so exciting. I love that we're starting here and I'm getting all the chills. So animals are, yes, so to start with the fact that yes, soul energy. Yes, they have souls. They are soul derived entities. When we're talking about all of nature and all of animals, we probably, in order for it to make a little sense, is think about the dimensions, and or like the ascension level of a soul. Which the ascension level of a soul doesn't mean good or bad or better or anything like that. But most, and let's say domesticated animals, our dogs and cats, the ones who live with us in our family and our homes, they are in a higher second dimensional soul ascension and bridging over to third dimension. I mean, they are 3D beings because they're materialized here and everything, but so far as where they occupy in their frequency, we are more like 3 and 4, and density is a better word for it, 3 and 4, and also crossing into 5 and anchoring into 5. And they are more 2 and 3, anchoring into 5. So I know that might seem a little esoteric, but if you can just imagine, and I think we can see the distinction here, those inner dimensions are very close or proximate to the signature of our Mother Earth, of Gaia. And that signature of Mother Earth is very close, especially from our relation to it, to creator energy or source energy. So it's like our parentage. The animals that are in our lives have this strong vibratory connection to Mother Earth, and we're somewhere, in the middle. But that Mother Earth energy is again mirrored with source energy. So Again, I'm just laying that out. We can just let it wash over us. But to some of the other details, so then other animals like reptiles and insects, think of them being more oriented to those deeper inner dimensions, more of the lower 2D or 1D. And so are things like plants and minerals, stones. A stone is a one-dimensional entity, but it is still an entity. And so it really has to do with how we relate energy to energy. You can telepathically communicate with a mineral, a crystal, or a stone. Will it talk to you about things that are like in your life? Not exactly, but you'll receive a vibratory conversation or communication that you can translate into something beneficial or interpret to something beneficial to your life. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that is so interesting. That is so interesting. I just saw a movie. I don't remember what movie it was, but it was about these two souls or people, and all of a sudden they were two stones
Oh,
communicating with each other. And they
yeah.
started moving, and they're like, "Can we move a stones?" And I should have remembered what movie that was, but it was like a recent movie that just came out that was popular, and it just showed that we can be in all sorts of places. I think it won an Oscar. Yeah, here, everywhere, something like that.
Oh, everywhere. All yes, I haven't seen it yet. I keep saving it for a special day off. Everywhere, all at once. I can't think it. Everywhere. Yes, that one.
Yeah,
Mhm.
this is super interesting. And what you said was that you sort of jumped over the fourth dimension. So you said that animals are 2 and 3, and then they jump over to 5, but not they
Well, they
don't.
mirror. It's like they mirror. So the fourth, there's two words that we use, dimension and density, and they mean slightly different things, but we also sometimes use them interchangeably. If we're talking about dimension is a thoughtscape. It's essentially it's what we all pass through in order to move beyond. It is really, in physics, it's the dimension of time. And so, but in metaphysics, it's the dimension of thought and feeling and emoting energy. And so, really, thought and emotive energy on its own it doesn't have an anchor into a material experience, and it doesn't have a higher experience of, like, creation. If we were to isolate just thought and emotions, like, it's not leveraged to have any real meaning on its own. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, for example, earthbound spirits, humans who depart from their bodies, but they don't move beyond, they're ghosts, if you will. They're existing in that fourth dimension. And so they're kind of that's the inter between, you know what I mean? They are maybe paying attention, but they're no longer anchored to the physical dimensions, and they haven't moved forward. So it's really just like a transitional place. And anyway, so animals they have a similar experience to us as it concerns transition. Their energy, well, what I've been shown, and I don't know any other teacher who has also had this experience, but what they've shown me is that when an animal, let's just take like a dog, just to, because there's so an animal, it's like there's like an endless amount of animals on our planet. So let's just take the common one, like a dog or a cat. And so that animal removes the soul energy from the body. There's the silver cord is severed, so the consciousness is no longer attached to the physical body. They are immediately in that fourth dimensional space, but before they move beyond, they go into the earth, into her portal, and they basically get a reset of their soul energy. It's kind of like a factory reset, and it mostly has to do with the human unconsciousness that they've absorbed. So they reset, and then they move forward into beyond. And yes, they have, it's like we do have all of these same experiences, but usually what we pick up on from this perspective is what's relevant to us. So people who have animals very close to their life, when I do mediumship, they will have their animals come forward, as well as maybe their mother or something like that. But people who maybe don't have relationships, they may not pick up, those animals may not come because it's not relevant to this life right now or what's going on in their life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does. And uh, I feel like this is something I also heard or read in the raw material.
Yeah,
Is that
sure.
where you have it from? Or you also said that they are telling me. So do you have your own guides that are
Oh,
telling you this?
sure.
Or
Yes, yes. So I don't know if raw material talks about that going into the Earth portal. I don't
no,
remember
they,
reading
I
it,
was just
but
thinking that they talked about the different densities and that
yes.
animals are in the second or third and we are in the fourth. Like what you said in the
Mhm.
beginning, that was like, I think I've read this from the raw material. Yeah.
Probably, yes, I do. I've read the raw material several times, and they do talk about Raw talks about, humans, even the humans that were in the project. He's like, oh, a couple of you are fifth dimensional or fifth density ascension coming in. So they, if you are, let's say, a fifth density ascended, coming into a human body, you still occupy uh, 0 to 3 dimensions. Plus, you have to occupy fourth dimension because you have to think and feel. But yeah, you have an anchor or a soul's trajectory of that experience. You have a history of that experience. And right. So I'm sure you'll hear some of that as well. But you said, so do I have, yes, I have specific guides, of course. And when I'm working with animal communication, a lot of times St. Francis will help me, St. Francis of Assisi. And
Mhm.
that's because he was a spiritual patron of animal. He was a spiritual person. And he loved animals. And so he really helps to bridge the connection between animals and humans here from having lived the experience. And so often also because he was a healer, St. Francis will come through when an animal that I'm working with needs healing or needs transition too, is going to be transitioning.
Wow. Yeah, because I mean, you have so many skills. I feel like you are a multidimensional teacher and medium and empath and spiritual teacher. So, when you are receiving messages, you said Franz of Assisi, are there other guides that you're communicating with as well?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. And the way it works is that an identification of an entity or, whoever it is, it really only comes forward if it's helpful. Like if I need to benchmark it or for me to understand the characteristics that are being enhanced by that particular guide. When I'm moving around, it's often, and I say moving around, whether in my life or working with others, I usually say they because it's just like a collective. The texture of it will be different. The literary voice will shift and change. And sometimes I say, oh, is it necessary for me to have, a name or an identity to who or what I'm connecting with? And sometimes it's like, no, just keep moving forward. And sometimes it's like, sure, here it's, maybe this archangel, or maybe it's this interdimensional collective. Maybe it's the Pleiadians, you know what I mean, or something like that. So sometimes, again, it's helpful and sometimes it just doesn't matter. Yeah. You asked me, though, if we reincarnate as animals or if that's
Yes, I was
possible.
going to ask about that because one one thought I have is that we perhaps move past that. That I have perhaps been an animal, in because what the way I see it is that we are perhaps evolving as a consciousness, as a soul. So I've been a rock before, and I've been an animal, and I've been a plant, and now I'm a human, and perhaps sometime in the future I am a Pleiadian or like a play. It doesn't mean that the Pleiadians are so far advanced. I think that's, also a mixture of different levels. But maybe, I'm a lighter being in gazillion years ahead. But another thought I have is that I think we also can drop into any consciousness
Yeah.
from the other side and explore anything. So maybe there's not an answer to this, but what do you think?
Right. And what you're tapping into is that time isn't linear, especially when we're talking about eternity. Obviously, it's not linear. Everything is happening now. So you as a Pleiadian and you as a stone are existing. And now, sure, from our perspective, because we do live on a linear timeline, we have a birth and a death and everything in between, it does help us to also view it from that perspective, which is why I think you bring in, oh, well, I've ascended beyond being a stone. And yes, so it's like it's both are true. There's every time we get into profound universal law, it's a paradox. And if we can hold both as realities, then I think we actually then find all of the answers, yet none of the answers at the same time. That's the paradox.
I know.
So, I mean, if you think about the raw material, which I'm so glad you brought that up, Ra, the social memory complex, Ra says that the humans that they were dealing with, one of them was a fifth ascension. I think one was sixth. I don't remember exactly. So those humans had ascended beyond the human experience, but dropped in. And Ra says that, those wanderers, as it's called, or the brothers and sisters of sorrow, ascended beyond that, but wanted to come back to help and pull up others. So with that, then I would say, and I don't claim to know everything, maybe next time I will, if there's a next time after this, you know what I mean? Like however I want to view it linearly, maybe I'll be a cat because I want to help cats. I don't know.
Right. Right.
But
Who
what I think,
knows?
who knows? I think though that one thing that is interesting is that when we do review past lives or even future lives or something like that we do, as I mentioned earlier, we probably recall or recognize, bringing into our cognition, recognize that which is most relevant. That's why I might review a life, which this is literally one of the lives that I've reviewed, where I was a nun and I was a bit frustrated because I couldn't move the message of God ahead faster. You know what I mean? But sometimes it has been because I am such an animal crazy lady. I have recalled times of being an animal. So humans may recall human lives way more than they recall animal lives because you're living a human life and you need those human lessons to be recalled.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I
Mhm.
just want to mention for those who don't know what we're speaking about when we're saying raw. So this is channeled material. The books are called Law of One, and this was channeled in the 80s. And there was this woman called Carla Ruckert who was channeling this, and she was a complete trance. And this has been resulted in many, many books. I don't know how many, but yeah, a few books, and it's just so comprehensive. It's just so complex. And for my English, being a Norwegian, it's been a bit too complex, but I love it nevertheless. And fortunately, we have teachers who, like you and others, who can explain this material for us. However, let's speak about animal communication, which we're going to speak about in that webinar. So animal communication, is that basically a psychic reading?
In a way, yes, it would fall into the category of functioning in the realms of psychism, because telepathy is the exchange of thought and emotion and just every kind of nuanced energetic communication that we can. That I do teach a specific kind of animal communication. I call it direct communication, which is especially we're considering incarnated animals, is me telepathically directly connecting with that living animal from that living perspective, as opposed to their higher selves or something, or as opposed to tapping into the human and then kind of getting what they may be assuming about their animal. So I intend to, like me having a conversation with you, say, Yannicka, what do you think about this? Rather than like pulling an oracle card and saying, what might Yannicka think of that? I want to ask you, I want to honor your perspective. I mean, obviously, I could also go into a deep trance and connect with your higher self to higher self. And, we could have that kind of communion. But how does that, if I only did something like that, I would be bypassing your wonderful, beautiful lived experience. And so that's my intention, is to connect with the incarnated animal, personality and all. So what that brings in is, if you ask this dog, hey, how do you like your food? And he goes, well, bacon is my favorite. And I should really get bacon all the time because he's not a nutritionist. He might be operating from his, little bit of a greedy appetite. However, they also will say, well, that kind of food hurts my tummy, and, get their full perspective. So that's one piece of it. And then I also teach that, if I need to, because I am an intuitive, if we need higher guidance, that your dog wouldn't know because he isn't a nutritionist or a doctor, then I can shift and ask spirit, what do we need to know, and get that kind of guidance. But I like to honor that direct connection first so we can really, again, get that full relationship. And it's so fun. As funny as you think, I'm speaking to the audience, you think your dog or your cat is, they are that funny, and they are intending to be that funny. They have sense of humor. They have a sarcasm. Like, just that's one of the features that you get confirmed with animal communication.
Oh my goodness, this is so exciting. And I bet you have a bunch of stories and experiences with animals. And okay, so let's speak about domestic animals like a dog or a cat. I know you have cats. How do
Mhm.
they perceive us? How do they see the world? Like, what are we to them? Are they well aware that we're humans and we think in this way and blah blah blah, this is how our world is functioning? I bet they don't know all that, but what do they know? How do they perceive us?
Yes, well, they have their capacity to be aware of the unseen or the psychic realms. They have that intact. Actually, they do learn our language too. They learn our verbal language. Obviously, we know that. They learn commands, they learn their names, they learn the words that have to do with their food. So they learn and they adapt to verbal language, but they're still mostly telepathic, as are we. But we have trained ourselves to disregard and pay more attention to verbal language, or at least a lot of attention to verbal language. So they can see and pick up, and if you want to think about it as hear all of our thoughts, they don't, because that would drive them crazy. We have 60 to 80,000 thoughts per day. They have way fewer thoughts than we do. These are much more present. When we're thinking about the past and the future and we're worrying about things, they're not doing that. They're being very present and enjoying the sunshine. So, but they do, because of that, because of how we are different. I would say they see everything that's going on with us. They get alerted when it's really when they want to help, because they are natural energy healers. So they will tend to us, nurture us. They will just bathe us with unconditional love. And that is, in a way, both healing us, but helping to ground us. So they kind of see us as a balloon barely tethered to the earth. And they kind of they want to bring us down, and they want to just remind us what's important, which is us here now, presence, love, unconditional. And so, yeah, they can see and hear all of our thoughts, but they don't see and hear all of our thoughts, if that makes sense. It would just drive them crazy. That would be way too much content for their vessel.
It's
No.
sort of interesting that they're more tuned into the other side, and that they can see beyond the veil, sort of like see things that are not there, and that they are behind us in evolution in one way, if you see it from that perspective.
Well, maybe, but I think that we move into a rough spot in our where we are now. Because again, if we think about how close they are to the Gaia frequency, I think in one perspective, they are more ascended than us. They haven't moved into the illusion that we have moved into. They have, in a sense, because they have relationships with us, but not as much, and that goes for wild animals too, because we're here doing what we're doing to this planet, and the wild animals are dealing with that. So they have one toe in the illusion that we do, but it's kind of like, I mean, again, it's not linear, but if we want to look at it as linear, we almost devolve as we go through this, which is why I say, like, our brothers and sisters of light and spirit, our guides, really, like, our chant, they're like, you're just doing something so amazing, like, to willingly go into that illusion of separation when it's not true. So yeah, I mean, in a way, I feel like they're more, because they are spiritually more advanced than we are. After they hit our animals, when they hit the age of maturity, let's say for a dog, maybe 3 years old or something, they surpass us spiritually. They are more spiritually advanced. They become a living spirit guide for us
Oh wow.
on this planet. Yeah.
But is that the fact for, a lion or a bear? I mean, they're getting from for their food and they're taking it. I don't feel like they're very empathic when it comes to I don't want to hurt this animal or this human being. And we've heard stories about people connecting really well with these wild animals, and then we've heard terrible stories of that going wrong because they mostly care about food, and that's instinctively. No, I can't say that.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Maybe
Well,
you can say it for me. It's their
instinctive good.
instincts. Yeah.
Yes, their instincts. Well, the thing is, it is our instinct as well, and in some ways, we have again entered an illusion in order, and we disconnect from it. I mean, plants are sentient as well. So, I love the Native American animistic way of being able to take the life of an animal and honoring its sacrifice in order for it to receive,
Yeah.
for sustain them and to clothe them. And the same with plants, you know what I mean? Like they are alive and sentient as well.
Yeah.
So animals and the wild animals, they are operating in their primal energy, and we are as well. It's just that they're really in that zone of primal energy, but they love their not all they said a lion, so like a big cat loves their young, and so yeah, they're empathic. They just have a different purpose for, you know what I mean? Like they have a different perspective. Some of us are walking around here taking lives and
Yeah.
not
You're so right.
acknowledging it. Right. So,
So right. There's so many perspectives to it,
yeah.
actually. And when you put it like that, it makes whole sense.
Mhm.
All right. So, okay. Communicating with animals, I mean, obviously there are a bunch of benefits to that, and especially if you have animals yourself. I would love to hear some experiences you've had with some animals you've connected with, and maybe your animals, and maybe if that surprised you, that you thought they wanted something or you thought something but it was totally different.
Yes, that's exact. Yes, they do surprise me all the time. And by the way, I should say that, I also teach animal mediumship, but, as speaking about, connecting with our animals who are here present, incarnated in the body. Yeah, well, okay, I'll tell you a really fun story about I'm going to tell the story because this person, this client of mine actually also published it on Instagram. So I know I'm not like crossing any boundaries and giving away, her private information. So it was a couple, a man and a woman, and their dog. And the dog, one of the things that the dog showed me was, I was like, he's showing me a room that is either, it's like I'm seeing a green room, and I'm also seeing a room that has like a gray blue, dark gray blue. And they're like, well, we have rooms that both of those colors. So I'm completely remote. I connect with the animals separate remotely first, just by having a picture and his name and some of the questions that the humans want to ask. And then I get on a Zoom call with them, so I've never seen their home. They don't tell me anything like that. So like, yeah, we have rooms that are one's green and one's that blue gray color. And then it was like, okay, well, he particularly wants to talk about the blue gray colored room. And he says to me, this room is cozy, and this room is where we meditate. And the man and the woman go like, oh, and she like looks at her partner, and he's like, I meditate in this room with the blue gray wall every day. And the dog, he comes in and he goes under the bench every time I meditate, and he like takes a nap. I'm like, okay, but he's not taking a nap, he's actually meditating too. And so that's why he says this is where we meditate. So, I mean, that's just pretty rad. Like, I mean, I've never been in their house, but acknowledging that the animal, this dog, also meditates with his human, and enhancing how this experience and this ritual that they have together is so beautiful and valuable to him.
That's so cute. So this must help you a lot with your animals, right? With your cats. Do you like communicate with them psychically or like telepathically all the time or most of the time or?
Well, when I teach animal communication, people who have animals, they often think that they're like, well, I guess I couldn't do that because I don't think I do that. But the fact is, you always are. Your animals in your family are like an extension of your body. So in if you're in your life, it's really fluid. So like if I said to you, Yannicka, what is your big toe on your right foot feel like right now? Like you have to go, wait, hold on. You have to like really focus, right? Like to go, okay, wait, I think maybe it's cold at the tip. You're just kind of, it's all a part of the global experience of Yannicka. That's what it's like with your own animals in your family. To isolate a certain message or communication, you kind of have to focus. So I actually teach people to connect with strangers' animals first, because then you go, oh, because their energy feels foreign to you, not like as native to you as your big toe. You know what I mean? And then you can translate that focus onto your own animals. And again, your animals are not thinking as many crazy thoughts as you are. So it is a simpler perspective. So when I want to communicate with my animals to get a specific kind of answer or communication, I do focus and I'm intentional about it. Because otherwise, we're just moving fluidly together like one body. But my cat Barnabas, who's a black cat, and he's like we always say he's the best person in the world. If you ever wanted to meet the best person, it's a black cat who lives at my house. And I reach out to him, like I shared this on my podcast recently. I was about to talk about animals. So before I went in, I wanted to record an introduction. And so I telepathically tapped in while I'm at my studio and they're at home and asked Barnabas, is there a funny story you can, share with me? And he wasn't interested in a funny story. He wanted to tell me, he said, why do you make your head hurt? Is how I kind of like translated it. I'm like, what do you mean? How do I make my head hurt? He said, you only breathe to here, and I can feel it in my body. He said, if you only breathe to here, then your head will hurt. And he said, and you know how I'm at home and I give you massages. He does his biscuits on my lower abdomen. So he was, indicating I breathe shallowly, and that if I breathe deeply, then, and so he told me that. And I was like, well, that's interesting. 2 days later, I had a migraine because I hadn't probably taken his advice very well. It's a common thing when we're busy, we're stressed and stuff. We sometimes don't breathe well enough. So yeah, and he just told, and then he also, I don't know, he tells me all kinds of things and I will see them evidentially later. If I either take his advice or I don't take his advice, I can see it later.
That's very interesting, because maybe you went in with the intention to communicate with him and his needs and about him. It's about him. And then he starts speaking about you.
Yeah.
Because I sort of didn't expect that, like if I would communicate with an animal, I would be like, okay, so what do you need and what do you like and how it's like to be you and blah, blah, blah. Not that how they perceive me. So that's really interesting that
They
they
love
can
us
be
so
your
much.
psychic reader.
Yeah. Yeah. They love us so much. And in a session, I have, they always want to talk about their human and say beautiful things about their human and give their human advice. And then I'm like, okay, it's like toward the end, I'm like, is there anything? Because the human wants to hear, what do you want? What makes you happy? What can be different? And then sometimes toward the end, I'll be like, well, actually, I don't like my water dish. I have to like really let them get their intentions out first. I also usually in a session just have them tell me about things that bring them joy, show me their house, what are your favorite activities? And that, opens them up, gives them the floor. But they always want to talk about their humans. They love their humans so much. They feel like that's the most important thing to talk about.
Wow. Fascinating. And so how strong is that bond? Like, have you experienced that they sometimes don't like their humans? I mean, it's not like we have given birth to them like a child who is so loyal, but I assume they are very loyal to, those who own them, but can it sometimes be like, okay, there's no chemistry here?
So such a great question. I mean, I would say the people that come to me to pay for a session to find out what the true thoughts and feelings of their animals are, it's not as likely that I'm going to come across that. But I will tell a secret little story this was not actually a proper client of mine. And obscure as much of the information as possible. So this person who was like, it was really inappropriate for them to reach out to me to ask for my professional opinion because we didn't have that relationship. It was like something else, but this person had learned what I do. Person called me out of the blue on a Saturday and said, I have this issue because my dog, you know, we had scheduled for my dog to be euthanized today, to be put down. But then when we get up in the morning, he's very peppy and he's running all around and his appetite is great and everything. So I don't know what to do now. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to help out. And I tapped in and the dog was like, yeah, I'm not ready. I mean, I have some more time and I have some more things that I want to do. Yeah, sometimes I don't feel well because I'm sick, but I'm still good, you know? So I told that to this person, and this person was disappointed to hear that information. This person responded and said, oh, well, my mother-in-law's coming over today. My mother-in-law doesn't like him, and it's really inconvenient for me for him to be here if my mother-in-law's coming over. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, man. You should put your dog down for the inconvenience. So, I mean, that's a disconnect, I would say. But again, it's probably the only example I have, and it wasn't a proper, someone who loves their animal coming to me. She was coming to me to, I guess, to get me to sign off on the fact that she could euthanize her dog, even though he didn't seem ready. So,
Yeah, I was just
sorry
thinking,
to bum you out.
what do the dogs think about, that we have the power to just put them off? I mean, if they're psychic, like you're saying they must know this. And mustn't that be terrifying for them? Or are they more relaxed, like you said, like, oh, it's not my time? They seem very agreeable.
Well, so being more connected to the eternal nature, animals don't tend to fear, even though there's a survival instinct that's attached to the physical body. Of course, they're gonna resist pain and they're going to, fight or whatever to survive. But in the depths of their soul and personality, they do recognize that actually if they're sick or something like that, they'll be freed from that and they'll be more themselves. And so the love and the relationships and the purpose can continue in that way. But in their body, when it's still viable, they want to continue their purpose in their body as much as it's appropriate. And I'm of the perspective that I don't think that you can get it wrong. Like our higher selves are not going to let a human end the life of an animal unless the higher self. That doesn't mean it's right in our perspective. You know what I mean? Like you just can't. You can't. There will be consequences, sure, but the higher self of the animal signed off on it too somehow. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's a little fuzzy, and I don't mean to spiritually bypass it all. It's still, there are consequences here, but I think they just relax in when animals have anxiety about transitioning, it usually has to do with wanting to clean things up here, wanting their human to feel okay with it, wanting the human to be able to be relaxed. And, while they're sad and going to be grieving about their loss, they just want them to be able to be a part of it as much as possible, be with me. And when I do a lot of actually death doula work with animals, it's really for the humans. And it's not a service. It just happens a lot. Everyone in my life who's losing an animal will call me. And I hold the space with them while the animal is transitioning. And there is this thing that, and I don't usually share this, so I want to give this with a grain of salt, but it seems like the animal, time and time again, the human will tell me that I told him, my dog or my cat, that he could go. He didn't have to stay for me. And I really felt it in my heart. And that's when the animal will go boom, 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 and power down. And I don't ever tell a human that when they're in the experience, because I don't want them to feel they have to force it, because it's okay if you're not ready. It's perfectly timed. And so yeah, the decline will happen like really rapidly when
Wow.
they give that, you know, they can anchor in their body. It's okay, really okay. And there's always this perspective of a loving, compassionate human who's like, of course they can go if they want to, but there's some kind of change that really deeply happens where they say, please. Oh, it's almost like, please do go if you're ready. It's what seems to happen.
Do you believe that in the same way as we have soul contracts to, to meet certain souls, etc., and have soul groups, that we are predestined to connect with certain animals in this incarnation.
Yeah, absolutely. Animals are a part of our soul groups. The other thing, so they will continue to incarnate maybe within one life or over other lives. They also, the animals who pass while we're still, they're most of the animals that are in our, that we have as, pets. I don't like that word pets as much. Their lifespans are shorter than ours. So a dog will be a strong spirit guide for the family and will actually pick the next animal to come into the life and will actually train that animal from the spirit side how to be a part of this family and how to serve them. And so, and there's also the what I've been told is, like, they say I'll send a portion of my energy, so it's not like maybe a huge reincarnation, but they're like, I'm going to give them a little bit of my frequency and to be in the family. But yes, definitely there is they're a part of our soul group in that same way that we understand humans to be.
I'm just so amazed by how complex it all is and how planned it all is. And it seems like, from a human perspective, things are a bit random, but it seems like nothing is random from the other side.
Yeah, it's a
Uh,
but much broader perspective, so you can see more of the picture. That's probably a good way to
yeah.
think about it. Yeah.
So have you always had these abilities, or did you all of a sudden awaken them through some incidences that happened to you, or something that yeah, you went through and it just opened? Because that tends to happen with some people and others are just born with it.
It's both. So when I was a child, my father and one of my sisters, they're both animal communicators. They love animals, and it was just very natural to be like, oh, he says this, oh, she said that, oh, and now she's saying this, and so it was just normal. Like, I don't know, I didn't, and even as I got older, and like I have two other sisters, and my mom likes animals too, but the three of us were like, really anchored in animal communication is what I didn't call it that then. It was just like, it's just your family. And the other two sisters, like, I just assumed, they just don't like animals that much. And that's okay. They're just not that into animals. And so I didn't think anything of it. And so I think from that model, I moved into the world with that same assumption that, of course, if you like animals, then you know what they're feeling and thinking, and I didn't think of it as like a specific psychic skill or something. I don't know. It just like was a part of my experience. And then when I was in my 30s, my dear cat was transitioning, and that I had this moment with him. So the vets kept telling me, I'm like, well, how do I know if I'm supposed to assist him? And the vet kept telling me, he'll let you know. And I was like, but you're a scientist. Like, that's not a helpful answer. What do you mean he'll let me know? But it was interesting. They kept saying he'll let you know. I'm like, what does that mean? He'll let me know. It was really frustrating and difficult because he was very sick, but you can't tell when's the right time to help him or let the natural process continue. So I was cradling him in my arms. I would to syringe some water into his mouth because he seemed very dehydrated. And he was very weak, but he shook his head really hard. And he was mostly blind. And he looked me directly in the eyes. And I felt in my body the words, no more. It's time. Like as if he had said it with his voice, but it was in my body. And so I knew. And that was when I had that moment where it's like, oh, okay, it's time. And so we assisted him. That was a big pre-catalyst to me understanding that animal communication is a thing. And then about a year after that, I had a spiritual awakening of sorts. And the first thing that opened up was this gift of animal communication as I was having energy coaching, where we're working through my energy body. And the coach was saying, there's something more we need to uncover. I don't know. And so I had this imagery of when I was a little girl talking to animals. And my energy coach said, that's it. That's it. That's what it is. You're an animal communicator. And I was like, what? Again, I barely knew that as a term. But I had taken into that session a concern for this cat who was a feral cat in my backyard, who was coming up to my back door and saying, and it's so funny again, like to me, I like, she's saying to me, and I don't even realize that's a weird thing to say because it's always been a part of my experience. She's saying to me, I can't have these babies. I need help. And, but I don't know, you know, what, because she was big and pregnant. So this energy coach, she's like, after our session, go out there and communicate with her. And so I did. I sat down and I was kind of hoping she'd be like, oh, no, I'm fine. It's hard to intervene with a feral animal and make a choice for them. So I didn't really want the responsibility. But I connected with this animal and I heard very clearly in my mind, I can't have these babies. But it was like, to where it's like, that's not my voice. It's not even my preference. Long story short, I took her to the vet, and the vet said, you're really fortunate you got her here in time because she couldn't have those babies. One was already dying and going to get lodged in her vaginal canal, and she would have died, obviously, so with the babies. So she was literally telling me, I can't have those babies. And she was a part of my family for 8 years after that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's so interesting how we have so different skills. And I mean, I've never had an animal, like a domestic animal in my life, a pet in my life. And
Yeah.
it's basically because I think I'm allergic and my family has never had it. And I'm even afraid of dogs. So,
Mm.
do you have any recommendations for a person like me who is afraid of dogs when I'm running, into the woods and people are walking with their dogs? I'm having pictures in my mind that they're going to jump on me and even bite me in the leg. I don't know where that comes from, probably a past life, but I'm
Mm.
super afraid that they're going to bite my leg for some reason.
Mm.
So there's a lot of fear there. But if I could, I don't know, send out some signals before or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so the thought, it's almost like whenever you had it, maybe it does seem like something could be from a past life. So I mean, I would probably, if I were you, maybe do a little meditating, do a little bit of a self in energy healing on it and seeing if you could wrap up that imagery and move it out because it's stressful for you and it's not helping you. But I would say if you can move that out, and then you can also assist it by when you see a dog coming, you could give yourself some affirmations about like, I'm sure this is a loving dog. I'm sure this is a loving dog. Look how much he loves this human. Just like think about that. Give your mind, give your energy something else to focus on, like affirmations. And maybe even if you're not sure, you could say, I wonder how easily we'll pass by each other. I wonder how much he's going to pay attention to his human as I pass by him. He's out
But,
there with this human. Yeah. Hmm.
but could I send out a message to the dogs like, please, guys, I'm afraid of you. Please leave me alone.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is, if you are, I want you to see if you can soothe your energy first because they are very literal. And so if you can calm yourself first and maybe even say, like, I want to stay separate, they're very literal. So if you say to like, for example, you want to speak affirmatively and literally to an animal, like you wouldn't want to say, don't be scared to an animal because that's the subject there is be scared. So, you know what I mean? And because I think that if you're having these fearful thoughts, which you can give yourself compassion and for, so I don't want you to feel bad about it at all or worry about your fearful thoughts. But if you can figure out how to even soothe it a little bit, and then you can maybe send out the signal of, I want to be peaceful. I want to pass by. I want to let you be with your human, something that is more manageable for you. But if you tell the animal, I'm scared, they're like, what are we scared of? Okay, should I be scared?
That's funny.
So
And
to speak.
the thing that is ironic is that I've had two roles because I'm a former musical theater artist. And I have two roles where my character loved dogs. And it's just so ironic when, I have no experience with dogs. And I remember on stage practicing rehearsals, being in rehearsals for Annie, because I played Annie. and this dog come running, towards me and jump up right at me, and I start crying. I'm dead scared. But it did go okay. So I think that's, like a small trauma I had there. Nothing bad happened, but it was just frightful and I was just embarrassed. Everybody was watching me, all the adult actors, and I started crying. And then I got another part, like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, where she has Toto all the time, like here. I just needed to befriend that dog. And I'm a bit proud of myself, with no experience and also this fear I had, that I managed to do that. And part of me has been like, oh, it would have been nice with a dog, but I'm still allergic, so it would be a problem. So I don't think it's in my incarnation
Sure.
to have a focus on that. But for those who have a focus on that, do you have any tips? Like, I know you're going to share tips, a lot of tips in the webinar that people can join, but do you have a tip right now on how we can communicate with our pet?
Sure. So with your own animals, I would say, you can meditate and just get, very open, clearing out the thought and emotional energy, just any kind of your regular progressive relaxation and mindful meditation induction to get you to that space that's very open. And then in your heart, or you might say in your mind, invite your animal to come and be in that space of the imaginal. And so when I say imaginal, I mean in our meditative space, our inner sensing, whether it's feeling, visualization, or our inner ear, our mind's ear, and any way that the inner sensing is occurring for you. And imagery isn't only visualization, it's all of the inner sensing. So invite your animal to come and occupy that space with you. Now, they may physically come or they may not. It doesn't matter, because we're having a telepathic experience, which is all of the energy. And then you can ask your animal a question, but what you want to do is be anchored in your heart and a completely open expectation. I mean, no expectation, but an expectation that whatever it is that you sense is your animal responding. But again, be anchored in your love for your animal, like listen with your heart. And it could be something that is so what you would expect, like, I love you so much, or is it dinner time? Whatever. Or it could be something completely unexpected. And I just want to encourage you to lean into that and accept it. And also, if you're like, well, if nothing really came, then what is that nothing like? Is that nothing peaceful? Is that nothing, as you think of your animal whom you love so much, it's love? So getting attuned to the much more subtle vibratory frequencies of this kind of communication, that's the process.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us today. And I really love this conversation. It's not a conversation I often have. And I love that you went a bit esoteric there, because I've
Me
always
too.
been wondering about animals and sort of where to put that, like in the whole picture. And this made a lot of sense. And also, I feel like yeah, that fear, just the way you're explaining animals, how spiritual they are, that helps me to look at animals in a different way, that I can actually learn a lot from them, and not be so afraid, but actually have them guide me. And I mean, I do use spirit animals in my practice. So if I see, a swan again and again, or I see a picture of a jaguar, for instance, that I did for many years, that is something I've been very like focused on, and it has helped me. But I can also open up a bit more to the physical animals.
Yeah.
Let
I'll
them
just
guide
tell you,
me.
it's actually common for kids to have a sort of traumatic moment with a dog, because dogs are usually larger than children and they don't understand, and maybe the adults who are around are a little apprehensive of a small child being around a large dog. So it's actually kind of common. It never happened to me, but I have, the weird family that I have. But I've heard that story a lot from people, just so you know, and you have specific incidents. And of course, it could be the past life as well.
Yeah, and also, I mean, mostly allergic to cats. Like I cannot be aware with cats. Like my eyes are just, I cannot see. So that is interesting as well. That sort of life gives you a hinder that you cannot be
Right.
together with a certain animal. And I think there's a teaching in that as well that makes me a bit foreign to, for instance, cats. Like you have cats, you love them, and I can't be around them. So that's interesting as well. And what is that about? Because if I didn't have that, I would probably, love to have cats around because they're so wise and yeah. So that's interesting.
Well, do you know that allergies there's a pretty good success rate with allergies and hypnotherapy, which I find really interesting. So there's a very
Ah,
um, noticeable mind-body connection. And some people can, I'm not saying all, and I'm not saying that it isn't also, something that is maybe hardwired into the body and the genes or something like that. But yeah, it's a lot of allergies are responsive to hypnotherapy. So I just find that interesting.
very interesting. And I just want to
Not that you
share.
need to, not that you need to do that. I just thought you'd find that interesting.
Yeah, but there might be people who want to do that, who wants the dog and have some allergies, and that's a real issue, and it can be a great companion, especially if you're alone. It's a beautiful companion. And I just had this experience once with this cat, and even though I'm allergic, I was just like, okay, let's forget about my allergy, because it came to me and I was sitting down on a bench and I was going through a rough time, and it was just around me. I've had a couple of these experiences actually, a cat following me and stuff like that. And I was like, why are you following me? And I started speaking with it. But this time it was like on the bench, and all of a sudden it jumps right up here. And it stays with its legs or something like around
Oh,
here. And I didn't get afraid. I don't didn't recognize myself, but I was in a weird mood. It was like a bit dusky outside and dark, and I was sort of like open-minded, very open-minded that day, like in this mystical mood, and I just let it do it. And we were just sitting there, and I had this cat here, and it was the weirdest moment. And my mind was blank, and I just felt that this was a spiritual moment,
yeah.
like a really beautiful moment, and that it had a purpose. And then after I think a couple of minutes, it just jumped off and ran away. And I was like, that was nice.
That's so beautiful. That sounds like a soul recognition. This cat's like,
Yeah.
there's my friend. I better go say hi to her before we leave these lives again.
I know, it was really beautiful. And I'm so happy that I let that happen instead of going into my fear and like, oh, I'm allergic, but I just let it happen. And yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I love that so much.
Well, thank you for sharing everything you did today, Tricia. And I'm really excited about the webinar we're going to have. And for everybody watching, if you're watching this before we're having this webinar, so join us, and you can also check out Tricia's work. So where can people find you?
Well, they can find me on Instagram, YouTube. I have a podcast, and my website. You can find it. Well, maybe we'll have it in the description, but it's basically my name with the word charm, Tricia Carr Charm, and that's my website.
Beautiful. And also, Tricia, you have a masterclass in our membership also about
Yeah, spirit animals. Yeah.
spirit animals and interpreting signs, when you see a snake again and again, or not so many snakes here, but if you see a certain type of animal again and again, what that means, etc.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you so much for being here today, Tricia.
Thank you for having me, Annika. Such an honor.
And thank you for watching, everyone. Much light from the US and Norway. Bye bye.